Jennifer Preston used to work right next door at the New York Times, as well as all around it in the New York media scene at Newsday and elsewhere. And now
New York Newsday.
New York Newsday. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
We're still sensitive about it.
I know. And now at the Knight Foundation, the leading supporter of journalistic activities. And full disclosure, I run something called the Tau Knight Center, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. And so Jennifer's in town for Social Media Weekend, and has had a relationship with Sri for years, so we thought we'd have you up just to talk about kind of you and social and journalism and technology and where it's gone. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the first thing I want to say is that one of the things that makes me so proud about working now at Knight Foundation is that Knight Foundation funded Michelle Ferrier's TrollBusters.com under the Prototype Fund. And it's just one of just many excellent examples where Knight Foundation is not only supporting terrific journalism, but also new ways and new tools and ways that people are using digital media.
Let's go back first for just a minute.
Yes.
Because you were the vaunted, august New York Times. I remember having a big discussion on blogs with Bill Keller in the day about trying to make them friendly to blogs, and Bill was kind of growling
And
about
links.
it. And links, right? Let alone letting those voices into the paper, let alone letting the reporters talk to others. You were the absolute vanguard there, and you brought it along. Give us a little bit of memory lane about something as an institution like the New York Times and how you got them into social and what you've seen since.
Great question, thank you. One of the things that I did at the New York Times as the first social media editor and working with journalists and trying to be in that role as an evangelist is to always tie these incredibly powerful tools to the journalism. So I found it pretty easy to get reporters to use Twitter, use Facebook once they learned how these tools were so powerful and so necessary for reporting, for tracking trends, keeping on top of breaking news, finding sources. And what was, of course, and we all know, is what is most powerful of all is when journalists use these tools to actually engage with users and engage them in the news gathering process. So that's what I found was the most effective way to win the hearts and minds. And I have to tell you, Barbara Gray was just amazing. So when
Barbara,
I went,
who was at Research at the New York Times, is now the head of our research training
here at
CUNY. She
CUNY.
was on Social Media Weekend earlier today.
She was on Social Media Weekend earlier today, and if you have not seen Barbara's presentation, you must go to the videotape and see it, because I recall going to the Washington Bureau, and I knew that the way that I would be able to get journalists in the Washington Bureau onto Twitter is for them to see Barbara show how she used these tools, including many of the tools that Sri taught me about at Columbia for journalism.
I want to point out to everyone that when the New York Times hired its first social media editor, they didn't hire some newbie or some very young intern and try to do it, because they knew it's about the journalism and it's about the diplomatic and political skills that you had to make that happen, right? So that's, I think, an important part of this. And I always quote Jennifer, who voluntarily taught with me for 3 or 4 years. She said 5 words that I repeat all the time that show excellent judgment on Twitter. That's
you quoted at the beginning of the day today.
Yeah. And I tell people, please think about that every time you tweet, someone is making a decision about you and how you behave. And we should also mention that the first time I saw you cover the Fort Hood shootings now several years ago, as well as Sandy Hook, transformed for a lot of people. How do you verify journalism when it's happening in real time and you get the real-time blog? So if you want to mention some tips for people who are watching now.
Sure. I think what's been really exciting about these tools is to see how newsrooms have been using them for audience development and how we have really strong audience development teams and just all the wonderful ways that we've seen BuzzFeed, share and distribute content on multiple platforms in really powerful and compelling ways. But the one thing that I think is really important and that we must not lose in newsrooms is how to use these tools for news gathering and how to gather user-generated content, the incredible video that's being just produced every minute of the day by ordinary people all over the world, and how to surface that. Markham is a genius at finding content, and not only how to find it, but how to verify it, because the most important relationship that we have with our readers, with our users, we know is trust, and it's hard to build it. And as Josh Stearns wrote as part of the First Draft Coalition recently, it's really easy, it can be very quickly broken. So the same standards that you bring to your reporting as a journalist, you have to bring them to your work when you're curating and using social media. So with my students here at Columbia, and I also taught social journalism at CUNY, I would quote this guy, Bob Dylan. You may have heard of him, okay? And it's like very simple. If it's not right, it's wrong. And guess what? If it's wrong, you don't put it in the paper, you don't put it on the Twitter, you don't snap it, and you certainly don't share it. So that's my most important advice, is just to bring the rigor of journalism to these incredibly powerful tools.
So now you're at Knight, and
Yes.
and this incredibly powerful institution again. That really, I know you've taken a tour of newsrooms around the country.
Yes.
You're constantly talking to people in newsrooms. And in a way, I think your job is to see what's missing and what's needed in this business where so much is missing and so much is needed. What are the priorities that you see going forward? I know the Knight Foundation is doing a big project of trying to rethink the strategy of the world, which I think is a good idea. I'm eager to hear what the outcome of that will be. In the intersection of journalism and technology, what do you see as priorities that we should all be paying attention to?
So Knight Foundation is committed to advancing the practice of journalism in the digital age. So what that means is we are looking to accelerate the digital transformation of traditional institutions and legacy newsrooms, because we think they are producing very strong journalism. At the same time, Knight is very committed to promoting and helping support new methods, new forms, and new models. Like, for example, here in New York, Knight supports the mobile lab at the US Guardian, which just produced a really interesting news around experiments around push notifications. But what are we finding most important, of course, is how people are consuming journalism, news, and information differently. And so that means it's about social, it's about mobile, it's about every single thing that you have heard about today. And journalists need to really be focused on their users. They really need to understand how consumers are changing pretty rapidly, and about how they are getting journalism. At the same time, Knight is absolutely committed to supporting terrific investigative reporting. We support, of course, the great work here in New York that ProPublica is doing here and around the country, and bringing it back to social, the work that Amanda Zamora, who just left ProPublica to take on a great new role at the Texas Tribune, has done at ProPublica, again, really using social messaging apps and all sorts of really exciting ways to engage the public and members of the public and readers in the news gathering process.
But maybe we could take a question from the audience.
Great.
So if you have a question, let us know.
And we have a hand held up
Yeah.
here. Since I'm mic'd up, hold on, I'll get it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, maybe your mic's still on. By the way, she's at Jennifer Preston. Please follow her on Twitter.
So Jennifer, you talked about legacy media and the work that the Knight Foundation does there, but some of the other work I do is around media deserts and
Yes.
places that don't have access to fresh news and information. So what is Knight doing to seed journalism in places that have never had good journalism,
That's
local journalism?
That's a great question. So Knight has currently $5 million in the field supporting the local media initiative, and we're now reviewing that, and we are working very closely with Tom Glazier and the Democracy Fund to do some research to help identify, where are the bright spots? Because yes, while there are news deserts, there are opportunities and potential partners, and they may not be traditional journalists. And that's where we think that there may be an opportunity for us to invest in.
The Democracy Fund is doing mapping of the total
Yes.
ecosystem around news.
Yes.
And we have to get out of the mind that news organizations are the only ones who do news now. Obviously,
Absolutely.
the public does, the platforms are involved. It's a complex ecology that we live in now. Do we have another?
Quick question, yeah.
Yeah, Mike,
Okay,
yes.
my question actually, it's a bit off subject. It's for this young lady here who is with Media Ghosts, in that you're going after trolls.
Right.
My question is, you're going after trolls who are going after reporters. There's also trolling going on in the employment industry, whereby a dear friend of mine was a whistleblower for the state of New Jersey. Because her lawsuit was in Google, it took her 4 years to find a job.
Right.
Is there some kind of service
Yeah.
like that for other industries besides protecting reporters?
So as I said, my mic's still hot, so I'm good. So as I said, we've been looking at certain cases, and absolutely we've run into those people who are public figures or advocates around specific issues. Toyota's whistleblowers around the sudden acceleration issue, et cetera, where they are being trolled from inside corporations and outside corporations because they are whistleblowers. And that gets into a longer term digital identity and reputation management issue, helping to work with those individuals to really, over time, overcome the speed and the persistence of information on social media. So that's a real challenge and very different kind of dynamic and that's why I said we're getting much more nuanced about the different kind of trolling behaviors and how to be able to handle those differently. And so we do work with some of those cases and are trying to figure out what are the kinds of services and supports that those types of folks need. They may need witness protection. And that might be something that we could offer, or blind job support, something that allows them to be able to still maintain a living and support themselves. You're welcome.
Next.
One more question?
So I just got back from a trip to Europe where in Germany there was a summit about distributed content. At the Newsgeist in Europe that Knight is not so much involved in as it's Google's, but there was a lot of progress there, I thought, in trying to reset the relationship of the publishers to the platforms. And what I've seen is that I think the most valuable thing we can get from the platforms, we in media, is data about our users, to have a relationship, the kind of relationship we talk about, to know
Absolutely.
our users better. And there's been reluctance from the platforms because they kind of say, what data? So I tried to force the question in this
What
trip.
data?
Well, but we were just saying we want data, we want data. So if we asked more
You want the
specifically,
email address.
yeah, that'd be a little hard in European
It's
privacy.
not hard.
But I think the question is further is how do we help know our users better? What is it about their behavior, their interests, their desires? And we got to more specific questions about how we could get that kind of information from the platforms in a way that respects privacy. And I saw real progress there that goes to that. what about the relationship that you see of media companies to the technology platforms, the relationship between New York and Silicon Valley? How do you sense the current relationship there?
Well, one of the things that I've observed in my travels around the country, because I spent 30 years here in New York, and I was so lucky to be at the Times at a place where there was a lot of experimentation and commitment to innovation. That's not the case at a lot of news organizations around the country. And one thing that I would like to see, and I would like to see Knight Foundation help facilitate, is more focus on local journalism, more focus on the online news sites at the local level. It's not difficult to get the attention of the Facebook, partnership folks when you work at the New York Times. When I was the social media editor, I would convene everybody. Remember, you guys would come.
Yeah, we were there at the first meeting.
For my breakfast,
With
because
Chloe,
I thought it, with Chloe Sladden of Twitter, because I thought it was really important for all of us to learn from each other as we were learning how to work with the technology platforms. But what I've observed around the country is that's not happening at the local level.
So they need better bridges and more connections.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the bottom line. We all know that there's tremendous opportunity for publishers to use these platforms to find and build new audiences. At the same time, we have to recognize that the growing concentrated power of these social and technology platforms is really changing the way that people are going to be able to get information, and there is not enough transparency around that, and that has to change. There needs to be more transparency about algorithms, about the data, because that's a threat, and we have to be aware of it and deal with it. At the same time, recognize that these platforms are just enormously powerful. I mean, you can learn so much about and find so much about your content and your audience. I hate that word, audience. Your community.
Thank you.
Your community.
Thank you. Or even market would be better than audience.
Yeah. Using these platforms. I remember while at the New York Times, we had this wonderful Civil War blog, and it was recreating updates on the Civil War during the anniversary. So what we did was we used Facebook to find people who were interested in the Civil War. You can use these platforms in all sorts of interesting ways. And we liked all those pages. We created a Civil War page. And people who might not have thought of the New York Times as a publisher of great content around the Civil War were able to discover it.
The great thing about that is it gets away from the mass view. At no time do I imagine the New York Times thought that every single reader of its 60 million people would
Correct.
be interested in the Civil War. But they knew there'd be an intense interest
Absolutely.
from a community
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
people, and they can serve
Yeah.
them.
Well, I'll tell you one project that we're looking at now to fund at Knight, and we could really use your help. We have seen how many single topic news sites are just been doing amazing work.
Syria Deeply, Chalkbeat.
Yes, Chalkbeat, Syria Deeply, News Deeply, the Marshall Project, which just won a Pulitzer Prize, Inside Climate News, which has won a Pulitzer Prize, Hechinger Report, which Liz Willens, team of just incredible.
Higher education, yep.
Higher education. But they've been struggling many of them, to find an audience, to really bring on some of the sophisticated approaches that like BuzzFeed and other more savvy online news sites are using analytics and other other sorts of tools. So we're looking to help support various experiments with these single topic news sites, bring them together as a community so that they can learn from each other, invite Millie and Aaron Edwards from BuzzFeed and our great friends there to share some tips, and because we believe that these tools and these platforms are enormously powerful to find and build an audience. But you got to keep an eye on them.
Great. Well, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So